Good evening, everyone. Indo-US Chamber of Commerce of Northeast Florida welcomes you to this leadership event. Thank you for joining us online, and I also thank our viewers who will be viewing this replay later. Thanks to our sponsor, SGS Technology, for sponsoring this event. I strongly believe people are the heart of any organization. Employees matter to company. The greatest investment company can make is in people. Developing leaders is one activity that compounds leaders' time, influence, finance, vision, and mission. It has been a great pleasure for us to put together this event just for you so you can gain leadership skills and grow personally, professionally, and as an organization. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this evening event, Sharan Satya. Sharan is one of the newest members of the Indo-US Chambers Executive Committee, serving as our Director of Marketing. Sharan is one of the newest members, a recent graduate of the University of Central Florida. Sharan studied both engineering and cyber security. He has started his career as a research analyst and security risk associate with Fortress Information Security, a leader in security services in supply chain risk management. Sharan is also an entrepreneur, having started his own photography business, Legacy Shots LLC. Over the last 8 years, he has developed a passion for photography and now routinely does business across the state of Florida. Please welcome Sharan Satya.
Thank you, Amida, for that introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sharan Satya, and I will be your moderator for this evening. I would like to start off by thanking you for joining us today. We know that there are a million different things you could be doing, but we appreciate you taking the time to be with us now. On behalf of the Indo-US Chamber of Commerce, we hope you are safe and healthy during these challenging times. Now, let's get into this evening's program. A general housekeeping note, we will be doing a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if you do have any questions, please hold on to them to the end of the session. I would like to take a few moments to introduce our speaker for this evening, Mr. Mark Missigman. Mark Missigman has been a leader and a genuine influence for the last 44 years. He served in the US Navy for 20 years, where he cultivated and refined his leadership abilities before retiring in 2004. He served as a consultant for our country while continuing to enhance his leadership experience. He is the owner of the company that bears his own name, Mark Missigman Enterprises, and also serves as the executive director of the John Maxwell team. Mark is certified to facilitate, speak, train, and coach individuals and groups in all areas of leadership development, professional skills, and personal growth. He is with us today to share with us his perspectives and insights into not only understanding what leadership is, but how to successfully execute leadership. With that being said, Mark, the floor is all yours, and I would just like to say thank you for your service, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mark Missigman.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and I appreciate the introduction, and it was my pleasure to serve our fine country. Amuda, thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak to the Indo-US China Chamber of Commerce in Northeast Florida. It is an honor and privilege to be associated with such a fantastic organization. If you remember, I met some of the members of the organization last year. I think it was in August for your annual gala. I had a great time, expanded my palate with some different kinds of food, and I had a great evening. So thank you for that invite as well. And Sharon, thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And that is something that all of the people can find on my website or on my LinkedIn page, but I want to share a little bit about myself so that people can get to know me before we get started into the content tonight. So I imagine everyone in the audience is part of a family, and everyone out there may have brothers or sisters. And if you would, type in the comments about how many brothers and sisters that you have, because I think I know a lot about brothers and sisters because I have a lot of them. You may be asking, how many does he have? 4, 5, 7. Those would be good numbers, but they would be incorrect. I actually have 11 brothers and sisters. I know my poor mother, right? She was a saint, of course. I have 5 brothers and 6 sisters, and I was the youngest, so I was number 12. American football team and a water boy, me being the water boy. Of course, as you can imagine, being the youngest boy of 6, I suffered a lot of things that happens among boys, roughhousing and guinea pig and football dummy and things like that. But it really didn't compare to what my sisters would do. You see, they wanted another little sister. So they would dress me up with the dresses and the shoes and the makeup. I still have nightmares. And to top it all off, I have a twin sister who, when we were young, our parents would dress us up in the same outfit. So it was all very cute until we were old enough to wear the clothes that we decided. And as my twin sister and I grew up, we had a lot of similarities. If I had a backache, she had a backache. If I had a headache, she had a headache. But the one thing that she never did, which I'm not really sure she's committed to our relationship, is she never really shaved her head like I did. So I think, she needs to step up and do that. Of course, I'm only kidding, folks. I'm only kidding. So today, Amuda asked me to come and talk to you all about leadership. So we're going to cover 3 things in leadership. We're going to cover leadership, what it is, how to do it, team building, and success path in leadership. So before we get started on that, though, I want to ask everyone to before we get started, I want to ask everyone if they are aware of their strengths and their weaknesses. Okay, because in leadership, we have to know who we are, because we cannot give away what we do not possess. We cannot share what we do not have, and we cannot share what we do not know. So the first thing in leadership is we have to know our strengths and weaknesses. And one of the methods that I would like to discuss with you is the DISC personality methodology. It's a 4-quadrant personality methodology that when you take an assessment, you understand who you are. And the graphic should be coming up on the screen shortly. Is the graphic up? It is up. There we go. Okay. As you can see, this is a 4-quadrant personality model. And as you can see at the top center, we have outgoing. Are you an outgoing personality style? But diametrically opposed to that, are you a reserved personality style? And as you can see on the right side, are you a people person? Or on the left side, are you a task-oriented person? Okay, so the DISC personality, the letters stand for D as in dominant, I as in influencer, S as in steady, and C as compliant. Now the D personality in the upper left-hand corner, they are concerned with the question of what. Okay, and 3% of the population identifies or turns out to be a D-type personality. As it says there, they seek control, they're deciders, they move very fast. And they're more task-oriented and outgoing, as you can see the relation there in the graph. If you move over to the right side, we see the I personality, which is influence. We're more persuasive. We want to know who we're going to work with. We want to be very social. 11% of the population identifies as an I personality. Now, before I go any further, I want to make sure everyone understands that whether you're a D, an I, an S, or a C, one is not better than the other. It's just different, as we're all different. And we all have different strengths and weaknesses that we bring to the table towards the team, towards our organization, towards our families. Okay? So moving back to the graph, on the bottom right side, you see the team-oriented person, the steady person, S. And thank goodness for S's in the world, because they make up a majority of the world, but these people are concerned with keeping peace and harmony amongst the group, amongst their family, amongst the team, in the business. They hold everything together. In the bottom left-hand corner, you have the compliant personality. These people are the ones that will research. They will know the product inside and out. They will know the process inside and out, and they're committed to following that process. But they move very slowly. So what is the importance of DISC? What's the importance of DISC? Well, DISC can help reduce conflict within your team. It also can help you with communication, because there's a study done in business that 80% of business problems come from a lack of communication or miscommunication or not communicating at all. So when you understand what everyone's DISC personality is, what their primary identifier is, which, by the way, when you do the DISC assessment, usually you'll come up with 2 identifiers. You may be a DI or an IS or a CS. And then there's some other folks who might have 3, like myself. I'm an ISD. So I'm either special or confused. It depends on the day, really. Depends on the day, really. So as you may be, let's say we have a DISC and a C working together, and a D moves at the speed of light and a C moves at the speed of sand. Do you think the conflict may arise there when you don't have the awareness of that's how that personality is? The D may say, oh, the C asks too many questions and slows things down. And the C will say the D moves too fast and doesn't consider everything. But when they know that what they are, a D and a C, the D can slow down for the C and use the valuable information that the C has researched about and knows. And the C can use the D to help make decisions because the C is very slow in making decisions. So that may explain some people in your world. But let me give you a real world example of how this plays out. I presume everyone has gone out to lunch at least once in their life, either in college or at work. We've all gone out, and it's great when you find a good lunch spot for that sandwich or noodles or whatever, excuse me, whatever you're looking for. So the D is in charge of getting lunch today. So the D goes to lunch, and he or she is calling the place on the way, driving over to pick it up, and hangs up and arrives and wonders why it's not ready when they get there. D's are impatient. I's would go get lunch, bring it back for everybody, and then after lunch, go to HR and talk to them why we can't have an ice cream social after lunch. I's are people persons, right? S's will go around to everybody in the office or in the family, in the organization. They'll get the order. They'll write all the details down. They'll make sure everybody gets a napkin, a knife, a fork. They'll make sure everybody has everything that they need and forget to get their own lunch. That's S's, team-oriented. Remember, peace and harmony. Now the C's, what the C's will do is they'll bring lunch from home because that's the only way you're going to know that what you have on your plate is healthy and good for you. Remember, they're very detail-oriented. So as I said, the DISC personality assessment will help us understand our strengths and weaknesses. And I will give you an opportunity to get one of those assessments at the end of this presentation at a discounted rate. Okay. All right. The great thing about DISC assessment is it will help you reach your potential when you know what your dominant personality is about. So for example, when I first saw this presentation, I thought I was a D. But after the assessment, I found out that I was an IS. So what problems did that cause for me? That caused for me that I was communicating in a way that did not align with my actions. Therefore, my communication was confused or garbled to the people that I was presenting to or working with or trying to gain as a customer. So that's why DISC is very, very valuable for your people interactions, because as Amuda started off with this, people is the glue that holds everything together and is the engine that makes your strategy and your company go. So if you're the organizational person in charge, or you own your own company, or you have a question about leadership, let's start talking about leadership. So in the chat, I would want you guys to put down, what's your definition of leadership, please? I want to see where we are starting and know where the audience is, if I could. We'll wait a second here for the chat to come up. Is leadership being a good example? Is leadership directing? Is leadership knowing the strategy? Is leadership having a great vision? Any of those things. It could be, or it could be all of those things. But if we were going to define leadership for this presentation and to understand it fully, we have to define it this way. Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Leadership is influence. I see Kamish had that right there. Good job, Kamish. There you go. You must have read the book on it. All right, fantastic. Good job. Leadership is influence. Influencing people to move in the direction that you want them to move, or believe in something that you want them to believe, and change their actions or change their attitudes in a way that they will follow you. But how do we do it? How do we make that happen? How do we influence people? Well, I'm going to give you 3 ways. I'm going to give you 3 of the ways to become a leader by influencing. Okay? And the first one is listening. The first one is listening to your people. First one is listening to your people. And it reminds me of a story. Back in my cybersecurity career, I used to fly to my clients to do the work. Sharon and I have the cybersecurity background as in common. And I flew into Philadelphia. And if you know, in Philadelphia, the rental car places are not adjacent to the airport. You have to get in one of those city buses to go to the rental car and pick it up. So I get to the airport, I'm in the bus. Now, the key point here is I had just instituted a rule for my life, and that was 5-foot rule. Anybody that comes within 5 feet of me, I'm going to look them in the eye. I'm going to at least say hello and maybe have a conversation with them. So I'm in the bus. I'm thinking about this rule. We get to the next terminal to pick up someone else to get to their rental car, and it's a lady. And she's walking down the aisle, and she's got a stern look on her face, and she's walking very heavy. When you hear somebody walking, you know maybe they're angry. And if you know Philadelphia, a lot of travel issues happen in Philadelphia. So I'm thinking, okay, don't come sit next to me. Don't come sit next to me. And she sat 1 seat away from me. I said, great, this is a great time to have a 5-foot rule in your life, but you know, I had the rule, I got to go for it. So I engage her in a conversation. During the conversation, I find out that she's coming to Philly to visit her daughter, her son-in-law, and her 2 grandchildren, which normally you would think that's a joyous event. But I couldn't understand why she had this stern look on her face. Well, what she told me was she's coming because her daughter was just recently diagnosed with breast cancer. So the conversation obviously turned on that news. So I talked to her, and we had a conversation and listened to her. And then her stop came, and we said our goodbyes. And she got up. And when she got up, I noticed that her face was a little softer and her feet were a little lighter walking down the aisle. So I used my technique of listening, of influencing her to help lift that load off of her. And I carried a lot of it for her. And I did that by listening to her because I didn't take the mic from her. I just kept asking her questions. Now, trust me, I had a powder keg of information that I could have shared with her. My father died of cancer. My brother died of cancer. I had 2 brother-in-laws die from cancer. I could have jumped in and said, oh, I know what you mean, blah, blah, blah. But no, I kept the attention right on her. And that's how you use influence. That's how you use listening to influence people. And when you listen to people, what that does is it creates a relationship. It creates respect from you to that person, and it creates trust. When people understand when they're heard, they will hear you. So you give away that when you're starting a relationship, and that's ability to influence people. Now, earlier in my Navy career, I did it the wrong way. I was new into the Navy, and I'd been in about a year. We were coming back for deployment, and I gathered all the new guys together, and I had just been elevated to a position of supervisor, and I was trying to rally the troops. I was telling them how good we were going to be. We were going to be the best communicators in the fleet. We were going to be the best ship in the fleet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Their reaction was, yeah, we're not really interested in that. We just want to, do our job and get off and go have a beer. And I was like, I didn't listen to them. I didn't understand where they were. So that was how you not do it. The next way that you can influence people and become a leader, a better leader, is have faith in people. Have faith in people. Because if you really are honest with yourself, or people really honest with you, maybe not a whole lot of people have faith in themselves or have someone that has faith in them. So when you show faith in someone, you are automatically changing their attitude, automatically changing their outlook because, hey, that person has faith in me. I want to do a good job for them. They have faith in me. I must have some some worth. I must be of value. I must be of value. And it's a funny thing what happens when you have faith in someone. What happens is they will work hard and they will go the extra mile, not to let you down, not to live up to that faith that you have in them. That's the second way that you can influence people. And the third way is understand people. Again, I'm going to refer to my Navy days. A lot of the people in my work center, in my division, we were all ex-athletes. So when we had time and we had conversation, a lot of it was sports, and we would talk about all kinds of sports, even cricket, soccer, football, basketball. It didn't matter. We had time. We would talk about it all and argue who was the best in this area or that area, and we'd have a conversation. Except this one guy named Jack, was never in the conversation. Now, me being the leader of this organization, I wanted to make sure we had team unity. So I went over and was engaging with Jack. And what I found out was that Jack wasn't an athlete and he was not really that interested in sports. So he couldn't join the conversation. What I did find out about Jack was he was interested in writing. He actually wrote poetry, and he actually was published a few of his poems. I also found out that Jack liked chess. So I had an idea. When we were off duty and not working and in our living spaces, I said, Jack, do you have a chessboard? I do. Would you like to play? So we played a few games of chess. And I will tell you, Jack was very good at chess. I did not even come close to winning any of those games. But what happened was a few of the other guys said, hey, I play chess. I play chess. And then Jack had some buddies to hang out with that spoke his language. So what I did for Jack was I understood who he was. I met him where he was. And then I showed others where he was to allow his relationship to blossom and feel a part of the team. And that's how I led Jack to be a member of the team. So to recap, you can influence folks by listening to them, having faith in them, and understand them. Excuse me. So I move on to the second piece of this equation, team building. Team building. How do you build a team around you? How do you get a team working together? How do you get a team that will believe in you? Well, you have to get buy-in. And how do you get buy-in? Well, you have to get buy-in in you. They have to believe in you first, because when people are looking to join something, a cause, for example, or an organization or a team, they want to know about the person leading the team, what the team is about, and what the message is. So there's two things. There's the person and the message. But what comes first is the person. This reminds me of the team that I was leading when I was in cybersecurity, and they were adding people to my team. So I called all the new members of the team to welcome to the team, find out about what they did, what challenges they have, how could I help? This one gentleman by the name of Ralph, his reputation kind of preceded him. Ralph was very, very good at dealing with data in computers and networks, crunching the data, making it useful for the users, making it the process faster and more efficient. In fact, he won awards for our Navy customer for the efficiency and saving the money, and he won an award for his development of the product. So I was really kind of excited to have Ralph on my team and to be leading him and to be a part of his story. So I called Ralph, and come to find out, Ralph was not very happy. I said, Ralph, how can I help you? He said, Mark, I don't know how you can really help me. But I said, Ralph, can we meet for lunch and find out about it? He said, yeah. I said, what's the problem? He said, well, I'm really not sure I want to stay with the company anymore. I'm kind of looking to go somewhere else. Now, I was alarmed because Ralph was a value asset to our company and our team. So Ralph and I met for lunch, and it was a nice day. So we decided to have a walking lunch. And I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we walked for 90 minutes. It was a long conversation. During that conversation, Ralph told me about, since he had done this project that I just previously told you about, that the company had told him, hey, you want to move up in this company? Go out and get your MBA. So Ralph went out, got his MBA. He came back, said, I got my MBA. They said, great, take this course. He took the course. He came back to the company. No movement, hadn't moved up in the company, was not promoted. And the other thing happened was the customer that he was supporting kind of just let him alone. They're like, you did great. That's it. So he was feeling left out. He was feeling not valued, and he kind of felt like his legacy was dying on the vine, if you will. Because what Ralph told me during this walk was he wanted to pass down what he knew to the next generation. He wanted it to not be a one and done kind of event. He wanted this to become something that lived on after he left. Plus, he told me he felt lied to, and he felt used, and he lost trust in the company. He lost trust in the leaders, and he lost trust in the customer as well. So during this conversation, I listened again. I said, Ralph, I understand. That's terrible. That shouldn't have happened. I can see your point there. But I knew that there was time for me to do something. So I stopped him and I said, Ralph, I understand you've been lied to. I understand you don't trust the company anymore. And you may be even looking at me thinking I'm the latest guy that the company's rolled out to come out and keep Ralph going and just keep him on the rolls just so we can have him. And he stopped and he looked at me and he said, Mark, you're right. He goes, I was thinking that you're just the latest in the line of leaders that won't help me and won't see my point. I said, okay, thank you for your transparency and thank you for being honest with me, I told Ralph. Let me ask you one more question. Ralph, would you give me a chance? And he paused and he looked me up and down. He said, yes, I'll give you a chance. I'm happy to report that Ralph is still with the company. He's got a new project. He's teaching people about what he knows, and his legend is living on. That's the law of buy-in. When somebody gets your trust and they know that you're being transparent and they know that you're being honest, then you have buy-in. Then you can bring their message to them. That's how you build a team. That's how you build trust within your team. The other way, or in addition to that, once you have your team together, they have buy-in in you and your message, is through delegation. Now, I have a detailed explanation of delegation in my book that's coming out in mid-October called Better Leadership: How to Become a Difference Maker in Your Business, Community, and Family. Delegation. Delegation is the art of developing your teammates, okay? What you want to do is pick out one or two of your teammates that you see are very high-performing people. You say, I can trust them. They bought in. We can do this with them. What you're doing is you're developing them into a higher role of responsibility and eventually into a leadership role, okay? So pull two of those people aside and say, okay, there's something that I want you to work on, something that I want you to do. And depending on the relationship, you can explain to them, hey, we're looking to have you get higher responsibility. And then you can begin the development of them through delegation. And what you do with them in delegation, the first step you want to do is have them do a fact-finding mission on the project or job that you want them to do. Have them do a fact-finding mission for you. Have them go do the research, maybe talk to teammates, maybe go out into other industry and find out about it, and then come back to you with what they found. So you're developing to be a technical expert in this. And then the next step would be have them do tasks related towards beginning of the implementation of that task or job or project that you're trying to delegate down to them. Okay? And then once you feel that they are up to the task, you kind of let them go implement them and let them do it on their own, okay? But you're there with them, okay? You just don't say, okay, hey, you got the job. This is cool. You're good to go. I'm going to go golfing, and if you need me, give me a call. Yeah, you don't do that. You just don't dump and run. You don't call them from the 19th hole after you had your first beer and say, hey, how's it going? And not really be there to help them. You don't let them play without a net. Okay? You don't let them play without a net. Okay. So when they're doing it on their own, the key point here is give them the responsibility to implement it, be there with them, but also give them the authority to do the job. Give them the authority to do the job. This reminds me of a story. I can't remember who told it to me. It might have been John. There were two executives that were going out to lunch one day, and they passed by one of their teammates who was in charge of the landscape around the building, and he had been a teammate for a long time. So they went up to him and they said, "Hello, how are you doing?" And he replied, and they saw that he was raking up leaves, but he saw the rake didn't have all the teeth in the rake. A rake has teeth in it, and you need those to gather leaves. And they asked him, "Why are you using that rake? Why don't you go get another one?" He said, "Well, this is the only rake we have. And I asked my supervisor for a new rake, but he hasn't bought one yet. I don't have the authority to go buy a new rake." The two executives said, "We'll take care of this." They went out to lunch. They came back. They talked to the supervisor. "Why doesn't this gentleman have a new rake?" And they got the answer. But what they decided to do was they needed to give the guy doing the job, doing the raking, the authority that when he needed tools, he could go out and buy new tools. So what that spurred them to do was to look at their entire organization. The people that were in charge of doing the job, did they have the authority to do the job? Did they have all the tools and abilities and permissions, if you will, to effectively do the job without being stopped with, let's say, bureaucracy, if you will? Okay? Bureaucracy. Okay. Excuse me one second. All right. The third piece of this puzzle, on the success path. How do I become a great leader? And how do I lead my people best? Well, as I said before, you have to know yourself. You have to know yourself well, and you have to know where your strengths are, okay? You have to put people first. You have to put people first because people are the equation. If you have great tools and you have great software, if you have great facility, if you have a great lunchroom, that's all fine and good. But if you don't connect with the people and allow them to feel as though they are an integral part of the organization, if you don't develop their skills, if you don't show them that they have a future here and that they belong, it's not going to go. If you have a great vision, if you have a great strategy, it's not going to work. I think somebody put in the comments I saw, leadership is about team building is about building other people up. And that's exactly right. Your job as a leader is the people and developing the people. You put people first. That is your job. When you're done with the people equation of your day, then you can go do your other job, which would be reports, meetings, etc. People come first. Put people first. The other thing that I would say that I know is play to your strengths. And that goes back to knowing yourself. And like I said, the DISC assessment personality model will be a great way to understand yourself and know your strengths for sure. Play to your strengths. Okay. What is it that I do well? Well, what I do well is I'm a good connector. I'm good with getting people together. I'm good with inspiring people because I'm an I personality. Are your strengths good with detail? Are your strengths good with making decisions? Whatever they are, play within your strength zone. John Maxwell has a book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Now, there are 21 laws of leadership. There are laws, just like if I was to go to the top of this building that I'm in and jump off, the law of gravity would take me to the ground for sure. I may not like it, but it is the law of gravity. And that's how these 21 laws are. But John, who actually wrote the book on the 21 irrefutable laws, will tell you he doesn't do all the laws well himself. He doesn't do all the laws well himself. So what does one do? I got these 21 laws of leadership. I don't do them all well. How am I going to be successful? That's where your people come in. That is where your people come in. And that's why it's key when you're team building is develop your people and their leadership. Because you're going to hire someone or bring someone into the leadership team that does the other laws well. So then as a group, we're covering all 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Does that make sense? I hope that it does. Play to your strength. The other thing is to be an effective and great leader is you have to have integrity. Integrity. Okay. Because what you say in public or what you say via email or what you say in the lunchroom has to match up to your actions. Because people will hear what you say when you get to know them at first, but eventually they're going to watch what you do. Watch what you do. So integrity shows that what you say and what you do is lined up. Is lined up. It reminds me of a story about Abraham Lincoln, former president of the United States. And when he was elected in 1860, he did something that was not heard of then, and I don't know if anyone has done it since, is that when he took the time to assemble his cabinet, the people that were going to work with him on a daily basis, he didn't select everybody out of his party or his friends. He selected people from the opposite party or who was his critics. Because he knew that when his presidency was over, he wanted to have a best friend, and he wanted that best friend to be him, because he stayed true to what the cause was, what the job was. So he wanted his critics to hold him accountable with his actions and what was greatest for the country. And if you know the story of Abraham Lincoln, maybe not, he was the president that resided over our country during the Civil War, and he held the country together. He ended slavery in our country, and he was one of the greatest presidents that we had. So integrity is very key to your success path. And what integrity does, what the benefit of integrity is it builds trust. It builds trust. When people can trust you, they're going to listen to what you say. They're going to do what you ask. They're going to be committed. They'll work that extra hour. They'll come in on Saturday. They will trust you. That is a great benefit. When you can have a team that do that, I mean, you can light this world on fire. I mean, it'll be fantastic. The other thing that trust does is it holds relationships together. Think about it. Your friendship, you need trust. Your significant other, you need trust. Within your family, you need trust. With your teammates, you need trust. With your grocer, you need trust. With your hair, well, I don't have any hair, but your hairstylist, you need trust, for those that do, right? Because you don't want people messing up your mop, right? I understand. Well, I think I used to. I can remember back when I had it. Anyway, my therapist says I'll get over that soon, but I'm not sure when. The other thing that you need to do on your success path is develop those other leaders. Remember, that's what you're doing in your delegation, right? You're developing those leaders. Because if you develop those leaders and they can take over the duties that you're doing as a leader, then you can go do other things, right? And you may think, Mark, well, that means I'm working myself out of a job. I won't be around anymore. I will say to the contrary. To the contrary, what you will become more valuable to the company because you're bringing people into the company and you're developing and you're increasing them skills, making them more valuable to the company. You're like an internal trainer. You turn out great people. You turn out leaders. And when we have a bunch of great leaders in a company, your success is unlimited. Your potential is unlimited. And you can go, whatever you need to do, find more clients, develop new skills, maybe go find the next person to develop. And that way it becomes a cycle of development of your people. And your people will be more happy because they're coming to work knowing that I'm going to learn something today. I'm going to be more responsibility. I'm not going to punch that same computer all day long. I may be in the boardroom next week. Do you think they might enjoy coming to work when they have those advantages and opportunities in front of them? Of course they would. I would. Wouldn't you? Yes, of course. Of course. The last thing that I will talk about on the success path is you have to keep learning. You have to keep learning about leadership. Okay? As Sharon talked about in my bio, I was in the Navy where I learned a lot about leadership. I was in cybersecurity consulting where I learned a lot about leadership. And then I've learned a lot about leadership as part of the John Maxwell team and in my own company. But I continue to learn. I read daily. I attend seminars. I have a coach. I go to mastermind groups. I read different books. You have to keep learning. You have to keep evolving because how I led when I first came in the Navy, or even how I first came into cybersecurity consulting, has changed today. We have to evolve and adapt to society, the way people are. Younger people come into the workforce and they have a different mindset. You may have older people in your workforce that have a different mindset. So how are you going how are you going to deal with that dynamic of personality, that dynamic of mindset, that dynamic of person? Okay? So your leadership skills are always going to be necessary to be developed and continue to be added to. All right. So let me bring all this together, if I may. And I hope y'all are enjoying this out here, because it is a distinct honor. It's a distinct honor to be here presenting to you. Leadership is influence, nothing more, less than less. You have 3 ways of influencing people. Team building is through buy-in and delegation. Now remember, success through your strengths and those of others is going to come through your leadership, because I kind of look at leadership as a verb. Leadership is success through other people. Right? Success through other people. You've got to get people to move along with you, because no one succeeds alone. And you may say, Mark, well, what about Tiger Woods or a tennis star or a marathon runner? Well, yeah, they may be alone when they're on the field to play, or they may be alone in the CEO's office, but they didn't get there by themselves. Tiger Woods has a chiropractor. He has a doctor. He has a golf swing coach. He has a mental coach. He has a lawyer, an agent. He has all those things. He's not alone, okay? So you need to have a team. You need to have people around you. You need to have people around you. Now, I show you many of these facets of how to become a better leader in my book, and I'm going to share with you real quick the cover of the book, just because I'm proud of it and I'm excited that it's coming out. So please excuse me my excitement, but I just have to share it with you. So there's the cover of my book, Better Leadership, How to Become a Difference Maker in Business, Your Community, and Family. Now, I talked earlier about how you can get this book, and what I'm going to do just for the Indo-US Chamber of Commerce is, if you sign up to get a pre-order of my book, I'm going to give you $1,000 worth of value out of my company. If you buy this book a pre-order, because it's going to come out probably in print maybe mid-October. It's just got done proofreading. It's at the formatter now. So it's very exciting. It's my first book. What's really interesting about this book, and one of the chapters, is I actually interviewed the former Secretary of the Air Force to get her, to get her views on leadership. And it's a fantastic interview. To get the book for that chapter alone, it's a great buy. It's a great buy. And I think, yes, they put the link up there in there, betterleadershipbook.com. And at the top, you'll see my books, and click on that link and it'll take you to the book page, and it'll give you more explanation about the $1,000 worth of value that you'll get just for purchasing the book. Just for you guys, the Indo-US Chamber of Commerce. Okay, enough of that. But you know, when you're an author, you got to get a shameless plug in once in a while. So please forgive me. Okay. So maybe now, you know, after this leadership talk, you may be saying, yeah, Mark, big deal. What's the big deal? So what? Well, here's the big deal. Thank you, Saritha, for the best wishes. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Very kind of you. So you may be saying, Mark, what's the big deal? Well, here's the big deal. Become a better leader just for the fact that we all have an average of 12 chances every day to influence somebody. Whether it's somebody you see in the hallway at the apartment complex you live, or the condo like I live, or you see somebody on the street, at the grocery store, at your business, a customer, client, your family, whoever. An average of 12 people a day to influence. And wouldn't you want to make that influence positive? To be a positive contributor to the world? I do, and I do. I told you the story about the lady on the bus. But one thing that I did recently for a young lady named Colette, and she is actually in the live session today. She works here at the building, and she does a fantastic job, the building that I live in. And I've noticed it. And I could have just said, great, I'm glad we got somebody good, and let it go at that. But what I did is I went to her boss, and I wanted her boss to know that she was doing well, because I'm sure her boss, who's the manager of the entire building, doesn't have the time to come out and watch everyone 24/7 to see if they're doing a good job. Well, her boss, being a good boss, came to Miss Collette and said, one of the residents came and told me you were doing a great job and gave her that affirmation that she was doing a good job. And that's the kind of thing that you can do in your world to influence the people in your world to make things better and to recognize someone. Or like the lady on the bus, just listen to somebody who needs someone to listen to them and lift their world up that day. You can make a positive contribution to the world. And I know you want to. I do. Join me in doing that. So I want to thank you all for your time for this presentation, and good luck on all your success. And come to my website, buy my book. Bala, thank you very much. I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate that very much. Now I believe we're moving into Q&A time right now. I think I turn it back over to Mr. Sharon. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. We are starting with a few leadership questions. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do have a question, please do put it in the comments. We will be seeing them up here, so we can definitely answer your questions. They will be up on the screen in just a couple of moments. But for the time being, Amuda, I think you had a couple of questions that you wanted to start with, and then we can kind of go back and forth.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Mark. That was a wonderful and insightful presentation that you provided to us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
To start with, since you mentioned about the 21 irrefutable laws of the leadership by John Maxwell, I wanted to start with the law of the lid question itself. So it says that leadership's ability is actually determined. Leadership ability determines the person level of effectiveness, right? How can we actually increase our level of effectiveness?
And you're exactly right, Amuda. The law of the lid does say that our level of effectiveness is directly related to our level of leadership ability. So just to explain that, if I may, so if our leadership is, say, a 7 on a 10-point scale, right? That means our organization can only be as good as a 6. Okay, so our organization butts up to us and can't go above us because we, being a leader, are only at a 7. So we need to become a better leader to be more effective, to go to 8 or 9, to allow the organization to rise up to us. So that's the first part of that question. And the second part is, how can we be better effective as a leader? First thing is, you have to want to. You have to want to be a better leader. So as I said, you have to know yourself. You have to understand who you are. The DISC assessment is a great methodology to understand who you are. And the other way is you have to study. The 21 Irrefutable Laws is a good book. There's another book out. I can't remember the name of it. Better Leadership. That might be a good book to help increase your leadership. But also is what you do is you have to put other people first. And when you put other people first, when you think, how can we be better instead of what can I get? Or how can we do this instead of how can I do this? When you start changing your mindset from me to we, then you become a more effective leader. Did I answer your question? You're welcome.
Yes, of course. Thank you. The next one I have is, if I need to promote an individual contributor to a manager role or hire a manager, right? What leadership qualities should I actually look for someone who is entering into a leadership role for the first time?
Excellent question. Well, I think the main thing that you want to, one of the things that will help that person is whatever leadership role you're putting them in over whatever area, they have to have some understanding of that area. Okay. So I wouldn't put, let's say, a salesman that sells cars in charge of software development, because that would be too far of a skill mismatch, right? The second thing would be, look for that person who is dynamic, look for that person who has that people first attitude, and look for that person who has had some success and accomplishments in the past because they've proven themselves. Okay. So, but if you're going to if you're going to bring somebody within, right, promote them up, do they have the technical ability? But then do they also understand that their technical ability and their leadership skills are two separate skill sets? One is different from the other, and they both have to be developed. But now they're in leadership. It's not how do I get the job done? It's how do we get the job done? That's the key thing that you have to make sure that they understand before I would bring them into a leadership position. Because what often happens in companies that don't understand leadership is they take their best accountant and make them in charge of the accountants. And he or she doesn't know anything about leadership. So that causes two problems for the company. First problem is they've lost a great accountant. And the second one is they have a bad leader. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
All right, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have a question from our audience. As a president of a club, how do you deal with individuals that are stuck in the old way of doing things? In other words, how do you lead a group of individuals that resist
That
change?
is a great question, Ms. Collette, and it is always a tough thing to implement change, but that's what leaders are for. We are agents of change, okay? So there's many ways to go about it, and it may depend on the individual, but generally I would say you have to understand what that person needs. What's their pain point, or what is their dream, or what is it they're looking for? When you can uncurl that and understand and show them that the new way will get them there, maybe better, faster, whatever it may be, then you have an incentive for them to change. Because if you're not offering them a benefit to change, a lot of people won't change. I'm sure all of us, maybe not all of us, but most of us of my age, which I'm probably have a little number of years on most of the people here, have had trouble with weight in the past. So you have to use this as an example. Do I want to fit in those old clothes again? Do I want to look better when I go to the beach? You got to provide incentive for those people to change. So that's why I would say would probably be a most effective way. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for your response, Mark. We have a second question. In your experience, could you please explain specific leadership skill sets needed to build teams across generations at a workplace?
That's a great question, and I do believe that is something that we are dealing with on a daily basis because of the fact that a lot of people are working longer in their life, and then new people are coming in with different skill sets. And some industries tend to hire younger folks because of their skill sets. But what I would say is what probably you have here is two groups of people, right, that don't know each other well. And some may fear the other, and some may have other issues with the other. So what I think you have to do first is break down those barriers, get those people to know each other. Do some kind of event outside of work where they have to interact just as people. And then once they break down those barriers and say, oh, well, that person's not so bad, or that person's, even though they're this or that, they're really just person. They want the same thing I want. They want to do well. Then you can begin to lead them better, because now they are not having that issue of that different generation or that different type of way of living as an obstacle. And the other thing is one of the things that I always like to do with my team is this works every time. You touch a heart before you ask for a hand. So you as the leader get to know that person and what they're all about. What do they like? Do they have a favorite sports team? Do they have grandkids? Do they have a favorite band? And then once you get to know them as a person, you can be that glue that holds a team together until it can gel and be a team that works independently. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Mark. So we have another question from our audience here. Could you please advise what is the best way to handle difficult coworkers?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Sharon. No, I'm only kidding. Every time I do a talk like this question comes up, and I always want to be careful. It may be a difficult coworker, may be that there's many things why people may be difficult. And I have to really go back to DISC. That is a tool that you can use, because oftentimes it's a communication issue. You have a D talking to a C, or you have a D talking to an S. If you have a D talking to an S, right? An S is very, very people person, but they are docile. Okay. If you yell at an S, they're going to withdraw. Okay. So then they may be seen as a difficult coworker because they don't participate, but you being a D have made them withdraw. Okay. But then when you know this, when you're aware you're the D, they're the S, then you can communicate better with them. So a lot of times it's a communication issue. Another case, it may be the person doesn't feel valued. They don't feel as if they're appreciated. So show appreciation. So the best thing that I could say is you as a leader, right, is understand what is on the mind of that difficult person. Okay. What is on the mind of that difficult person? If I go back to the story that I told you about Jack, who was the guy that did poetry and chess, for a period of time, he appeared to me as a difficult coworker. But when I realized that it wasn't him, it just that he didn't feel like he belonged to the team, then once I changed that problem or fixed that problem, he became a good coworker. The other thing that I would say is that potentially, and I want to say this as softly as I can, potentially you may have to look in the mirror and realize that it might be you. That it might be you that is causing an issue with this coworker, and you may have to change the way you approach that coworker. That's an honest answer, and to be honest with you, that was me in several occasions. That was me with Jack. I had to change how I approached with him because I was just going with what was easy. I loved sports. I talked sports all day, but I had to make the extra effort to connect with Jack so he would become an effective worker and not be that troubled coworker. I hope that answered your question.
Definitely a sensitive issue, but I'm sure it's very common in the workplace even today. So we got a couple more questions that we've put together here. Trust is the foundation of leadership. What qualities a leader must exemplify to build trust?
Great question. Trust is, as the questioner said, is the foundation of leadership. Again, I go back to integrity, is when your words match up with your actions. You have to be that good example. So do the people see you doing what you say you're going to do? And do your people see what you say you want them to do? So in other words, do you walk the talk as well? That's how you build the trust. And it is do what you're going to say. If you say that you're going to do something for someone, or you're going to make this happen or build this up, do it. But if you don't do it, come back and apologize or explain why it didn't happen. Be transparent. You just say, hey, I blew it. Remember, leadership is people. So common mistake that leaders do when they go to the office, they park in their spot where it has their name, and then they walk in, they go to their office with the big window and the nice big desk, and they start their day. But the question I would ask them is, how many people did they pass along the way? Did they stop and say hello? Did they stop and ask them how their day is? Did they stop and ask them how their kids are? When people see you being a real person, and when you are a real person, genuinely, don't force it, then they will trust you, and you're exemplifying behavior that you want. Because don't you want them to ask you about your kids, your family, your favorite sports team? Don't you want to have that personal engagement? That builds trust as well.
Thank you. We got a couple more questions. Everyone feels the pressure to deliver more from less. People are often overworked and underutilized. I'm sure everyone will be curious and excited to hear you on this question. How can we do more with less?
Wow. That is a great question. And boy, I'll tell you, I'm going to have to think about this for a second, but it's a very great question. And the first thing that comes to mind is that you have to prioritize. If you're the leader, you have to prioritize for your people. What exactly is the most important? Okay? Because many of us, myself included in the past, and sometimes even today, I got to watch myself. I get caught up in what is urgent. What is urgent instead of what's most important. So it goes down to, how do you prioritize things for your people, and do they know it? Do you communicate that priority? Okay. And then they can focus on what's important. And when they feel like they've accomplished what's important and they know it, then I think that lowers the stress level. But if they come in and they don't know what it is, and they're constantly going from this urgent thing to that urgent thing to this urgent thing, that creates stress, and they feel underutilized because they're not necessarily working within their strength zone. That goes back to knowing their strengths, knowing your strengths, and utilizing them in their strength zone as well as you in your strength zone. I think that far as being underutilized, that's a tough call, and it's so very specific to individualized. But I think as a leader and as yourself, you need to know where you work best and where you utilize, and when that's not it, have the courage to get up from your desk and have a conversation with the person, whether it's a supervisor or a leader, that that you have that conversation and say, I think I'm doing this, and I have an idea about what maybe could do better, and maybe make a suggestion. Maybe you're the leader that needs to happen, that needs to get out there and correct that problem.
We got another question here from Mr. Desai. What are your thoughts as a leader? Inspect what you sorry, let me say that again. What are your thoughts as a leader? Inspect what you expect without seemingly overbearing leader.
I think Mr. Desai is saying, what are my thoughts about a leader, about expectations, getting what I expect without seeming overbearing as a leader? I'm going to go with that, if that's okay.
Perfect.
With that, okay. So I think that all comes down to communication, and it ties into what I just, the previous question that I answered is everyone knowing the expectations, knowing what the priorities are, and having a bar to set. So do we want to be excellent? Do we want to be good, excellent, or outstanding, right? And then you have to define that. So it really is behooving on the leader to be very communicative to not only we're going to do the job, not only are we going to paint the wall, but we're going to make sure the wall is painted and no paint gets on the fireplace, for example. You have to really be definitive about what your expectations are, and people will rise up to that. They really will. But if you are standing over the person while he's painting the wall, watching every brush, then you become overbearing. You got to give them room to do the job and trust them. Trust goes both ways. You have to trust your people. They have to trust you. Hope that answered the question, and that was the question.
That was the question. That was perfect.
All right.
Amuda, do you have any other questions that you would like to ask?
Yeah, sure. So Mark, you mentioned about leadership is all about influence, right? And then few of the tips you gave, like listening well, knowing what people need, as well as I must add value, the faith, and so on. But how do we actually measure influence?
Great question. Great question. How do we actually measure if I have influence on someone? Correct? I think the definitive way is when you ask them to change something that they're doing. So maybe it's a direction that they're going, and you realize that, oh, once we got into this, I see that the direction changed. Okay. From maybe an external source. I mean, 2020 has been a year of change perpetually, it seems, for example. So if you can go to your people and say, okay, we've got to change direction. We got to do Y now. We were doing X. Now we're going to do Y. If they go along with you with minimal complaint, some people just like to complain even though they're going to do it, is honestly, if they change with you and go do that, then you know you have influence. You also know you have influence when you know that they're listening. You know that they're listening and they actually do the things that you want them to do or act. Or maybe they even repeat to someone else what you said. Hey, I was talking to the boss the other day, and this is what he said, and this is what we need to do, so let's go do it. Something like that. That's how you know when you have influence. I mean, you know when people like you, but you know when you have influence on them when they act out in a way that you need them to act or do what you need them to do. That's when you know you have influence. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next one I have is the secret of our success is seen in our daily agenda. So can you share us one thing that you do every day that has made you so successful as a leadership expert and as an executive director in John Maxwell team?
Great question. Great question. So one thing from my daily agenda, probably the first thing that popped into my mind was journaling. I have a journal. And what I do with that journal is I capture my thoughts. Where am I at today? How am I doing with this project? How am I doing with that project? And the one thing is I lead myself. Okay. I look at that journal as a way to lead myself. So how am I feeling? What are my thoughts? And whatever my thoughts are, I just kind of let them go on the paper. And then I kind of look at myself. Am I doing what I need to do to be successful today? Am I doing what my people need me to do to be successful today? So that's one thing in my daily agenda that I do every day is I journal to keep myself accountable, but also to make sure I check in with me, because the first and hardest person to lead is yourself. And that's a great question. And I do talk about that in my book, Better Leadership. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we got a few more minutes before we start closing up the event tonight, but I got a couple more questions for you, Mark. What would you say has been your greatest accomplishment?
Oh, wow. I think as a father, my daughter got through college and she didn't, we didn't kill her. I mean, I think that was probably a good accomplishment. No, but I think my greatest accomplishment is probably a gentleman that worked for me while I was in cybersecurity. His name was John. And a long story short was John came to work for me because he wanted to move back home. He wanted to move back home he lived in South Carolina. He wanted to move back to Georgia because he just had his first child. The grandparents lived in Georgia and he hated going to see them and then leaving. So he came to work for me. And when he came to work for me, I found out what a great worker he was, what a great teammate he was. And then I found out how much he made. And I couldn't believe it. He was way underpaid. So he was making, I think $35,000 a year working in my industry, which was way underpaid for the skill set and the work that he produced. So not only did I give him raises over the years, but I developed him, as I talked about, through delegation. I developed his skill set. I developed him not only from a cybersecurity expert, but how to run contracts, how to run projects, how to deal with customers, and lead a team. He was actually running my business for me at the end of his time with me, but he had to go home because he was starting to travel too much. And I was happy to say that he is now working in a program for the Air Force, which I can't tell you anything about, but he's running his own team, his own business, making well over 6 figures. So I think that's my accomplishment that I'm most proud of, or my biggest accomplishment, is what I was able to help him do and how I changed the arc of his life for him.
That's truly impressive. How do you continue to grow and develop as a leader?
I touched on it with Muda's question about my daily agenda. Is I continually read. I continually read whatever book I can get my hands on. As a member of the John Maxwell team, I'm in a mentorship program where I continually get mentoring from the faculty and staff that John has assembled, some world-class coaches and leaders, where even I have questions about, well, what about this, or how do I do that, either in business or life, and they mentor me. And I also attend seminars, webinars like this to continue learning. Some of my favorite people that I attend and listen to, obviously John Maxwell. Simon Sinek is one that I like to listen to a lot. Another one is Russell Brunson. He's a fantastic entrepreneur. He is one that I learn from and continue to develop my skills.
I'm a big fan of Simon as well, so definitely a great influence.
Great. We have that in common also. That's great.
Amuda, do you want to ask a couple of questions? Do you have anything?
Yeah, sure. We can still take 2 or 3 questions before we can close the session. Giving and receiving feedback are essential to reach peak performance and achieve strong business results. How do you give constructive feedback as a leader?
Great question. And that is so true. That statement is so true, because without feedback, we don't know how we're doing. If someone doesn't put a mirror to our face to see, or for ourselves, how we're doing, we're never going to know what we need to improve, or even always comes out as a negative. We never know what we're doing well, right? We never know we're doing well, because I would love leaders to be more attuned to giving out praise, right? Giving out praise than negative, but giving out praise publicly. But if you're going to have a negative connotation, do it privately, right? Because as people, we tend to over-evaluate and under-celebrate, and we need to turn that around. We need to celebrate more, even the little things, So how do I give constructive feedback? That's a great question, because someone asked me this last night, and I'm going to use the same answer if I may. So if I have to get someone to improve their performance, I try to use the taco method. I think we may be all familiar with what a taco is, a food, right? You have a shell on the outside. usually when you have a hard taco, and you have meat in the middle, right? So I start the session out by telling them something that they're doing well, okay? Because I think that opens them up to say, okay, I'm doing something well. And then if I have something hard I need to talk to them about, I do that in the middle where the meat of the taco is. And we talk it through, and I allow them to make sure that they understand what I'm saying, and I allow them to tell me their piece about it. I allow them to give me feedback on what they think it is. And we come to an understanding and agreement about the way forward. It's a mutual thing. And then I like to end with something that they do well, again, and a second thing. So they leave not thinking like I just came to the principal's office or I just came to the boss's office and I got chewed out, that they are now motivated to go out and correct that thing for that constructive feedback because they leave on a high note. That's how I give constructive feedback.
Thank you.
You're
That was
welcome. Fantastic.
So this is something everyone would have experienced in their life. So failure is something we all would have experienced. Can you share with us some steps to fail forward and turn that failure into a stepping stone for success?
Fail forward. I love that. I think somebody wrote a book like that called Failing Forward. Mr. Maxwell, of course. So my idea of failing forward is this: we're all going to fail, right? And I could take up the next hour telling you about all of my failures. But the one thing that I would say is understand why you failed. Okay. So if life knocks you down while you're down, learn why you got knocked down. Because if you get knocked down and you get back up and you get knocked down and you get back up and you get knocked down and get back up, and it is always the same thing, the same reason, you're not learning anything. It's great that you have this perseverance to get back up, but if you're not learning anything while you're down, then you're always going to get knocked down by the same thing. So I would say you have to learn why you're down, learn why you failed, so you don't repeat that mistake again. And hopefully the time of period of success while you're up comes longer and longer and longer, and you have less failures. That's the idea behind that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have a question from Prince. What would you consider a major milestone as a leader that most people will come across, and how would you approach it?
Whew. Great question. A major milestone as a leader. I would say the major milestone for any leader is probably a few. I mean, that's such a loaded question. It's a great question, by the way, Prince. I love your name, Prince. Is when the first time you become a leader and let's say you didn't have the skills. Wow. I mean, that's a scary day. So the thing that you need to do there is just believe in yourself and continue to move forward and do the best that you can, understanding that you know that you're learning. So if this is the first time, it's the first time. Okay. That's a milestone. The other milestone is in a leader when you have your first big problem. That's a milestone. You have your first big problem. And I will tell you that most leaders, including this one, thinks that as the leader, oh my gosh, I have to be the one to solve it. I've got to come back and be the hero and give everybody the solution. Then we can move on. And that was a mistake on my part. And a lot of leaders, new leaders do that. When you have a problem, when you have your first big obstacle, maybe assess what you think about it, but then bring the team in. Who do you need to solve this problem? What do they think? Maybe they have a different insight that creates a different solution. Allow them to give you their solution. Use the team. And that's a great milestone. And when you guys turn that solution around, when you remove that obstacle, when you achieve your goal, that's a wonderful, wonderful day. Wonderful day for the team and a wonderful day for you as a leader.
Perfect. Thank you for the response, Mark. We are concluding our session with the Q&A. Amrita, is there any closing remarks you would like to make?
Sure, Ram. Thank you, Mark, for providing us with such an insightful presentation.
My pleasure.
And you have shared with us all the wealth of knowledge of leadership skills and also the path to success. I hope everyone who has listened to this session will take it back home, do some reflection, and then develop other leaders, whomever they interact with. And thank you, Sharon, for moderating this event very well. Thanks to all our attendees our sponsor, SGS Technology, who sponsored for this event, and also my volunteer leadership team, both the executive committee and the board members who actually put this event together to make it successful. And also, I would request the attendees to fill in the survey form. The form will be sent in the email or it's in the chat also. You can use it and fill in the survey. We would like to hear from you. While we wish to meet in person, we are organizing another Facebook Live event next month. That's November 12th. This is going to be organized or provided by our finance advisors from our sponsor, Wistar Credit Union. So they will share their insights on retirement planning reassessment during the COVID-19 economy. And we will send the details soon as we have finalized the speakers. So stay tuned, follow us on Facebook, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to know what interesting things are going on within the chamber. So we look forward to connecting with you. Thanks, everyone. I think we can end this session. Thanks all.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Great questions.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.